from a guy who exploited his teenage fans for content.
0.6, but not my type of 9.6, more like my type of 9.4. Here we have a 9, an 8.8. Despite the overexposure, I'll still give you a 9. A 9.1, another solid 9. Good for you.
To a girl who put a child's autopsy pictures online for money. Or a pervert traveler who calls and objectifies women wherever he sees them.
And look, even hot chicks in the poorest town in Russia walking past. Look at the hottie. Wow, the poorest hot chick in Russia.
YouTube has been home to all kinds of disturbing and twisted characters. But there's something common in all of them. Sheer narcissism and a blatant disrespect of anyone other than themselves. Take Onishin, for instance, a YouTuber who's been repeatedly accused of grooming teenagers and manipulating them to fulfill his desires. Or the infamous crime YouTuber, Zavgirl, who didn't shy away from using an 11-year-old victim's autopsy pictures for a quick buck.
I wanted to see all those pictures, autopsy and stuff. So yeah, I'm not going to take a chance. But yeah, so just go ahead and it's Patreon. I think it's like $3 for the lowest tier. You can just cancel after. You can just do it 1 month and be done, you know.
In this video, we take a leap into the twisted world of 3 notorious YouTubers who, despite all the controversy, accusations, and bad spotlight, still managed to be active on the platform. No matter what way you comb through the ugly side of YouTube, Onishin would be the first to get caught. He started off like a lot of early YouTubers, mixing up comedy skits with his own twisted takes on pop songs.
Let me pretend I respect you, but first let me vent. Don't be scared of the facts. You fear me making the call. You're afraid of the truths I tell. You wish I would just go AWOL.
But it wasn't long before he started showing his true self, with his demeaning and outright objectifying views on women. He'd rate pictures of women, usually under 18, giving brutal, objectifying opinions about their bodies. These young girls thought they were seeking validation from their favorite creator, but in reality they were feeding into the hands of a PDF file, who turned them into content for his millions of followers.
I will say that you look like my ex-wife. Secondly, I'd rate you a 5 out of 10. You have a very big face. It's very facelicious. I'll say 6 out of 10. We got another 6 out of 10. This person freaks me out.
Boom! Now you're all zitty.
He apparently saw himself as a truth teller, someone brave enough to say the things others were too scared to, and his fans believed him. Until a girl named Sarah appeared onto the scene. Sarah had been watching Onishin from the age of 12. A couple years later, she started talking with him and his then-wife Lainey, also known as Kai Avaro online. Soon the conversations between Onishin's wife Kai and Sarah turned sexual, with them sending explicit pictures of themselves to each other. Sarah thought she was in love with Kai. But for her, Sarah was just another target, another vulnerable person to manipulate. A year later, the couple invited her to their home in Washington. And sadly, Sarah's mother temporarily gave her legal guardianship to Kai. And that's when hell broke loose for Sarah. For the next couple of years, she was treated like a toy. It wasn't until late 2016 that fans began questioning Onishin's relationship with Sarah and rumors started to float. At first, Onishin tried to pressure Sarah to deny the allegations, but eventually kicked her out of their home to quash the rumors.
So here is that video. You could say we are kicking Sarah out, but...
However, years later, Sarah revealed that Onishin had in fact slept with her soon after she turned 18. But the harassment had been happening for even longer. This got predator catcher Chris Hansen on the case. And that's when things started getting real messy for Onishin. Because, as it turned out, Sarah wasn't Onishin's only victim. As Hansen dug into the story, more women came forward with similar allegations. One of those women was Canadian singer Shiloh Hoganson, who opened up about her horrific past with Onishin. At the time, Onishin was 25 and married to his ex-wife Sky while Shiloh was just 17.
Found out that my first subscriber was Onision, which is...
He got back to me right away within 24 hours. I was 17 by the time he said that he loved me and he was getting a divorce. He was 25.
She calls it the most horrifying experience of her life.
You know this video is never going to be online, right? No one will ever know how much I abuse you. Hey, open your mouth. Open your mouth. Open your mouth.
No, Greg, I don't want any.
Open your mouth.
I don't want any, Greg. Ow!
Fortunately, she came to her senses and decided to move away from the degenerate YouTuber. Since then, 6 women have come forward, accusing him of harassment and severe emotional abuse. As the public outrage grew calling out for a ban on Onision, the platforms started taking action. Patreon was the first to ban Onision, and then followed Twitch. But YouTube? Well, they took their sweet time. Despite Sarah filing a lawsuit, people continuing to call him out, and even the FBI getting involved, it took a year for YouTube to at least demonetize his channel. But for someone who has never apologized, let alone admit his wrongdoings, many still feel that Onision was let off too easily. When it comes to objectifying women on the internet for views, Onision might be the most despicable creator out there, but sadly, he isn't the only one. Meet Benjamin Rich, aka Bald and Bankrupt, a UK-based controversial travel vlogger who's known for visiting desolate Soviet regions, making inappropriate remarks on women, and racist jokes on every opportunity. And that's just scratching the surface. The more you dig into his carefree, fun traveler persona, the uglier it gets. In fact, a subreddit, Bald and Balder Dossier, has been connecting the dots on his sketchy behavior. You see, before opening his YouTube travel diary, Rich was active on several controversial online forums like Roosh Fai and Desolation Travels, under aliases like Vorkuta, The Fantasist, and Ligurian, where he would frequently spill out his personal details of his time in the remote Russian towns and obsession with tourism. In these posts, Ben would talk about his travel plans to old Siberian towns where poor local women would gasp at seeing an iPhone. He had no qualms about laying out his preferences in Russian women, and even gave advice on how to get laid in India to others. And as if that wasn't bad enough, there's something far darker in his past. Back in 2000, Benjamin Rich was even involved in a forced intimacy trial, along with 2 other men in the UK. A case that was thrown out after the victim failed to identify which of the 3 men attacked her. Surprisingly, Ben mentions a similar story on a Roosh Fai post under the alias Fantasist. Thinking himself undercover, Ben also revealed some shocking details of the entire act itself, as if it's some badge of honor. Even his current name, Bald and Bankrupt, isn't just some catchy title. It's a part of his personal story. Turns out Rich wasn't just morally bankrupt, he was actually broke, owing £30,000 in credit cards and loans in the UK. As per his own accounts, he changed his name from Benjamin Rich Swift to just Benjamin Rich, and skipped town to avoid paying debt. From there, he began to craft his new online persona of a fun-loving traveler. He started his travels from India and already had his creep factor turned up to 11. Familiar with his blogs before, it was nothing strange. He made over 14 videos of his journey through India. But his channel didn't take off until he featured the desolate towns of Eastern Europe and Central Asia, places most people would never dare to visit. He shared a view of life in old Soviet towns that no one had ever seen, and that's what made him popular. But even then, he portrayed women as objects.
Look, even hot chicks in the poorest town in Russia walking past. Look at the hottie. Wow, the poorest hot chick in Russia.
In a now-deleted video, Rich made comments so disgusting that even his loyal followers couldn't ignore them. He went as far as saying that women are often responsible for the violence they often face.
First of all, we have to accept that whilst no woman ever deserves to be raped, some of them are, however, responsible in large part for the crime committed against them.
When someone called him a creep and a pest on Instagram, his response was, "I've been a pest for decades." And although his wild insults towards women might have gone unnoticed in India, he didn't have the same luxury when he toured Chechnya in 2019. During a train trip, he joked about having Chechen chick serve him a drink in his cabin.
Hopefully at some point in the night at some stop a Chechen chick turns up and shares my compartment with me, and I can put on some romantic lighting.
This offended a lot of locals, leading to him getting traced down and held up by the authorities, and was even forced to publicly apologize for his statement.
Оскорбить Чечня или люди здесь, но это было случайно, но я понимаю сам сейчас, что это здесь не привык, это некрасивый был, и я прошу прощения люди в Чечне, и что...
But instead of schooling his behavior, his toxic fans called Chechnyan authorities insecure and ridiculous to make someone apologize forcibly for a random flippant joke. This public sympathy only fed his ego and made him double down on offending others. That said, it's still baffling to understand how Bald and Bankrupt has gotten away with so much without facing any serious consequences. And it's not just him. There's Zav Girl too, a YouTuber who's gotten away with something even sinister. If you've ever found yourself down the true crime rabbit hole on YouTube, you've probably heard of Tiffany Zavarelli, also known as Zav Girl. She claims to give a voice to the victims of tragic crimes in front of her 110,000 subscribers. And while true crime stories aren't for everyone, there was a time when even Zav Girl's own fans turned on her. It all started when Zav Girl covered the horrific case of 11-year-old Gannon Stauch, who was brutally murdered by his stepmother, Letitia Stauch. The crime was gruesome to the core, and Zav Girl covered every tiny detail spanning over 50 videos. But things took a darker turn when she announced that she'd filed a Freedom of Information Act request and paid a hefty price to get the case files. What she didn't tell her followers was that she got her hands on the most disturbing part of the case, the autopsy photos of the victim. But she didn't keep them to herself for long. She likely wanted to make profit on her investment. So she decided that it was a good idea to put those autopsy pictures as an incentive for a subscription to her Patreon, all without caring about how the victim's family would feel.
I'm not going to take a chance, but yeah, so just go ahead and it's Patreon. I think it's like $3 for the lowest tier. You can just cancel after, you can just do it 1 month and be done, you know? And I'm going to upload it within the week.
And as you might expect, the backlash was inevitable. People were disgusted by her actions, calling out how heartless and vile this was. But instead of apologizing, Zav Girl tried to justify her actions by claiming that since she posted the photos on her private Patreon instead of YouTube, it was somehow fine. She then releases a lengthy statement on her channel stating, "Different people feel differently about this. Some people think making a video with autopsy photos is bad, while others like me think it's interesting and informative once you view it in a scientific, detached way. It's just one of those things where it depends on the person." Stauch's family, of course, wasn't happy with his mother stating, "Gannon is not an experiment nor a piece of paper or photo. He is a child. No one deserves this, and no one wants to be in these shoes." The controversy even reached the mainstream media and eventually resulted in getting banned from Patreon for violating the platform's policy on violent and graphic content. With her reputation in the drains and a ban from Patreon, Zav Girl tried to salvage what was left with an apology video.
I apologize to everyone I've hurt, but especially Gannon's family. I've been doing some major soul searching and reflecting. I'm not this evil, heartless person like many are saying, but I'm also doing a lot of self-reflecting, and I'm looking into sensitivity training.
But to many, it felt more like a justification than a genuine, sincere apology. Despite the scandal, Zav Girl's subscriber count continues to rise. She's still gaining followers, still making money, and still publishing content. It's disturbing. Fans say people with histories like hers should not be allowed to continue building platforms, profiting off tragedy and avoiding consequences. Yet, here we are. Makes you wonder how far these disturbing influencers are allowed to go before they face any real consequences for their actions. More importantly, what kind of example this sets for their young and impressionable fans, who see their favorite creator get away with what others consider bad and think that they can do the same.